Working Fans Podcast. Cool.
Yep.
All right, here we go. Coming down 3, 2.
Welcome back for another week of the Working Fans Podcast. This is AJ. I'm the former wrestler. We've got Dave, the ultimate fan, here with us as we do every week. Our producer Joe likes to make us sound good and makes us look way more professional than we actually are. As always, you can find us on Twitter, that's @FansWorking, Facebook, Working Fans Pod. We've got email where you can reach out to us and please contact us to let us know what you think of the podcast and for any ideas that you might have. That's workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. We're on Instagram where you can keep up with us at workingfanswrestling_pod. And then you can now listen to us on all major platforms, including Anchor.fm. We're on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Apple Podcasts, and you can actually check us out on YouTube. Now, it's important when you go onto the Apple Podcasts and YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a rating, let us know what you think so you can help us out and we can continue to do what we love and bring you guys in as fans.
Hey, wrestling fans, this is Gary Michael Cappetta, and you're listening to the Working Fans Wrestling Podcast.
All right, everybody, it's the Working Fans Podcast with Dave here. And today I got a gentleman who's been in the wrestling business for a long time. He's been everywhere. This guy's worked for Vince Sr. and Vince Jr. He's got a book out called Body Slams, Memoirs of a Wrestling Pitchman. Ladies and gentlemen, Gary Michael Cappetta. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing pretty well. Thank you. I appreciate the invite.
No problem. Honor to have you on. And, like I was saying, you worked for both Vinces. Just a little quick before that, how did you get to that? Like, you started off working for the Worldwide Wrestling Federation for Vince Sr., but how did you get to that point? How did you break in, and how did you get that gig?
Well, back then there were no independents, so the WWF was the only organization in the Northeast. So, there was no place to go to break in. You just started, at some of their local shows, and I didn't have any desire to be a ring announcer. I just went one night and they didn't have anybody, and I volunteered. I thought for the night, and then they asked me to come back. It was in the summer, and in the summertime in Wildwood, New Jersey, which is a vacation resort where WWF had weekly wrestling shows. So they just kept on asking me to come back week after week after week throughout the summer. And that's how I started. It was like, there's no training. I have never had any kind of broadcasting class or anything like that.
So I guess the best things happen on accident sometime, huh?
Yeah, at the end of the summer, I found out that Gorilla Monsoon was actually one of the owners of the territory, and he was the promoter of that part of the territory, and he just asked me if I would continue with him. So I did, and I was working elsewhere. I was teaching school, but at night I'd hop in the car, and just for New Jersey, Eastern Pennsylvania, and Delaware, I was announcing an average of 3 nights a week. Because it wasn't just weekends, it was, any night.
Right. Yeah, it was a big territory back then. You were going on the road constantly. It was all about the arena and house shows, I'd imagine.
Yeah, there were high schools and colleges and convention centers and rodeo arena and army base and hockey rinks and theaters, just all little places. And I did that part-time for 2 years, and then they had a need for a TV announcer, and they asked me to come in and do that. So I did their TV for 8 years.
Wow. So you worked directly with Gorilla Monsoon for a little while. Now, Gorilla's someone not a lot of people got to work with directly that are still around. How was Gorilla? I've never heard anything but nice things about him.
He was the best. He was the reason that I had any career in pro wrestling. But he was somebody who, unlike other promoters that that I had come in contact with, he cared about you as a person. And yeah, I mean, we both lived in New Jersey, and he would invite me over. He had a pool table in his basement, and he treated me like a human being. So, over and above being an announcer. So I really appreciated that.
Oh, that does not sound like the bar was set very high for promoters, though. If treating you like a human being was the way to go.
Yeah, that's not asking much, right?
No, not at all. So that was what else I wanted to ask you, because you're also in a unique position. You worked with Vince Sr. and Vince Jr. Compare and contrast for me a little bit, if you could. What are the main differences between those two? In particular, how was Vince Sr.?
He was more quiet, kind of like a dignified kind of guy. He was always well dressed, but he was just as cutthroat in business. He just had other people carry out what he needed to get done. If you read Bruno Sammartino's first autobiography, he'll tell you about how Senior had blackballed him before he became champion. How he had blackballed him across the country where Bruno wasn't able to work anywhere. And so, they did their little dealings with the state athletic commissions. Every state had a commission. And, but to your face, he was nice. He was, I remember once I had been doing their TVs for a couple of years. And when we would do the TV, we would tape it. And we would tape it every 3 weeks, and we would tape 3 one-hour shows a week, and they were syndicated and broadcast across the WWF territory. And I think I was either making $40 or $60. Now this was maybe it wasn't so bad. It was in mid to late 70s, but I thought I deserved more, and I went in and I asked Senior for a raise, and I thought I had the answer to anything he was going to throw at me, about why I should get this raise. And he just simply looked at me and said, I just can't afford it. And I what do you say to that, to this millionaire, who controlled all of, wrestling for the Northeast, such a lucrative territory. But this was common with the McMahons. They could never tell you that you did a good job. They would never, because I think it was because they didn't want you to get a high opinion of yourself. So that you would go in and ask for a raise. Because Dave, at the end of the night, he had given me the raise that I asked for. He just couldn't. They got that, that higher amount of money. I think it went up to like $75 or something like that. And I got it every 3 weeks after that.
Wow. So yeah, I've had a few bosses like that back in the day too. Just keep their self-esteem low, so this way when we give them anything at all, they're appreciative.
That's right.
Yeah. So my producer Joe, he's been reading your book. He's been getting some stuff to me, and one of the things he wanted me to ask you was that you referred to Vince Jr. a lot as Vinny. And what he picked up on was that you don't come across intimidated by Vince Jr. at all, like a lot of people. And he was curious, how do you view Vince McMahon Jr.?
Well, when I started their TV, he was the commentator. So I was inside the ring, and he was, maybe 10, 12 feet away at a table doing the commentary as the wrestling was going on. And he was, he just wasn't a nice guy. Just even back then, he would strut around. Now, remember, he was the boss's son.
Right.
So, it was before he had created anything. Yeah, I never had a warm and fuzzy relationship with him.
I can see that. I can hear that.
And what's interesting? A few years ago, I read Justin Roberts' book.
Okay.
And it seemed to me like not much had changed.
No, Justin Roberts does not have a lot of nice things to say about him either.
No, but he would say the same kind of things, I never, like I said, I only came in to do my, I announced at the Meadowlands, at the Philadelphia Spectrum, and then the TV, and then these little shows in between. So I didn't travel with anybody. I just stayed at my home base, so I didn't have a whole lot of interaction with them, like on the road or anything. So there was no opportunity for anyone to say anything or do anything to me, outside of the arena, because I would just go home every night. But Justin had that experience, and it comes across as a bit like a bullying kind of experience.
Oh, yeah. As a fan, too, you hear the stories. Jim Ross has talked about it, who seems like he had a good relationship, well, an off and on relationship, maybe a complicated one. But there's no doubt there was bullying. You hear about that and what people are saying.
Anyone that goes to the network and sees my work on All-Star Wrestling, or if you go back, anyone that has any tape on any WWF broadcast that I did, you will notice that in the 8 years that I did their TV, I was with them 11 years total, but 8 years on TV, he never once mentions my name, ever. It's just this blank announcer. Let's go to the announcer. Or, Jimmy Snuka just attacked that announcer.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much how he treated me, like as we cross paths. Yeah, he might, if we sort of like walked by each other, he might acknowledge me, he might not. He was just an idiot. So I don't think I don't think that's changed much.
I love your honesty, Gary. Well, I will ask you about another promoter. You went to work for, I believe, Pro Wrestling USA, but I don't think it was that easy. I think you had to win over a Gary Juster at the time. Is that right? And how did that all come about?
Yeah, that is correct. When I finished up with WWF, McMahon had already begun expanding into other parts of the country, little by little, and he was taking up talent, like taking a Hogan from the AWA, and he was just taking talent from different organizations. So Jim Crockett and Vern Gagne, so the NWA AWA, decided to get together. They formed the group Pro Wrestling USA, came into the Northeast, and when Vinny went national, a lot of the local promoters, Vinny took over the promoting of everything. So all his local contacts in his towns were out of work. So because they had deep roots in the communities as far as promoting the shows, Gary Juster, who represented Pro Wrestling USA, teamed up with them, and so they were to get an announcer, to be the ring announcer for each of their shows. And every one of them called me and, said, Gary, would you come in? So I said, sure. So when Pro Wrestling USA learned that they had gotten Gary Michael Cappetta, the Pro Wrestling USA people said, nope, he can't be the announcer. And the reason is, and I understood it, it was that I was so closely identified with the WWF that they wanted a fresh look. And so one by one, every promoter called me and canceled, except for one.
Wow.
And I went out that night. I think it was to Brooklyn, and when Gary Juster walked in and he saw me, I could tell like his face just fell. And but by the end of the night, I had won him over. He saw my interaction with the fans. I think we went out for something to eat, just he and I afterwards. And he saw that I'd be more of a help than a hindrance. And yeah, so then I started working for Vern Gagne and Jim Crockett.
Sounds like a lesson to be learned there. Just, no matter what the situation, work hard, give your best, and good things can happen.
Yeah, just persevere, like just don't take no for an answer. The guys that canceled me, they would apologize. Oh, Gary, I'm really sorry, but so it is what it is, and you just go ahead and do what you think is best and what's right. And when I look back at some of the decisions that I've made over the decades that I've been in pro wrestling, even those that turned out to be decisions I shouldn't have made, you always have to put yourself back in the situation. And probably in doing that, I would have made the same decisions. Because, you have certain alternatives, you have certain options, and the climate is what it is, and you evaluate it. You're not always right, but who is,
Absolutely. Eventually, you went to WCW. You got part of WCW. How did that come about? Was that just an extension of Pro Wrestling USA, or how did that work out?
No, that came. Well, I had already been announcing for the NWA at their monthly shows in Baltimore, and then eventually in Philadelphia, and then when the two groups teamed together at the Meadowlands. So Jim Crockett knew my work, and then he started bringing me in to do Clash of Champions, which were midweek TBS specials to promote their upcoming pay-per-views. And then he brought me into pay-per-views, and then I started doing AWA pay-per-views. And when Turner Broadcasting bought Jim Crockett's NWA, that was in 1988. I think it was like the first week of either October, November. And that December, I did an AWA pay-per-view. It was Super Clash in Chicago. And Jim Hurd, who was the guy in charge of WCW at the time, sent word to me that I was not to do their pay-per-views anymore because I should be exclusively to WCW. And I sent word back to him, forget it. If you expect me to sit home when I have an opportunity and you're not going to pay me for that night, there's no way I'm going to sit home. Like, you don't owe me. Right. So put me under contract, and then you'll have me exclusively. And that's what he did.
Sidebar, actually, I didn't have this written down, but you mentioned Chicago for that pay-per-view, and I've been talking about this recently. Is that not just one of the best wrestling crowds there is? They always seem enthusiastic, no matter what the product or where, what they're bringing.
Yeah. Chicago is a terrific wrestling town, and I connected well with the fan base there. A few years ago, when I decided to bring my stage show to Chicago, we had a nice turnout. Yeah, Chicago's been one of my top cities.
Now, how did you get the nickname "the most dangerous ring announcer"? I heard Jim Ross refer to you as that.
I believe, and there's a little controversy about who this was, but I believe it was Jim Cornette one night who referred to me as the world's most dangerous announcer, which was kind of funny because I come across as being so conservative and harmless, which was based on the world's most dangerous wrestler, which was Dick the Bruiser. And also, David Letterman had the world's most dangerous band. And that came from Dick the Bruiser because David Letterman grew up in Indianapolis and was a wrestling fan. So it was just one thing that I believe it was Jim Cornette threw out there, and it just stuck.
That's awesome. Now, one particular WCW moment I got to ask you about, because this just doesn't happen in most people's lives. You were on the tour in Germany where Mick Foley handed you his ear? Is that correct?
No, well, he didn't. It was tossed to me.
Okay.
His ears had been just hanging off the side of his head for months.
Oh, no.
And it was from a spot that he did where he'd be propelled into the ropes, put his head between the top and the center rope, and then spin himself over the top, and he'd be hanging there with the ropes around his neck. And then the referee would do his best to open the ropes, and Mick's head would slip through. And every night, little by little, his ears kept on getting nicked. And so in Germany, it was the ropes were tighter. The referee was a French referee who didn't speak English and didn't know the spot and didn't know how to help Mick get out of the twist of the ropes. And so it really, the one ear really tore. And when Mick got back into the ring, he was wrestling Vader. The ear just dropped off, and the referee picked it up and tossed it to me, and kept on yelling, "Ambulance, ambulance!" And I don't speak French, but I got that.
Right.
So I put the ear in my hand and went backstage, and Ric Flair was in charge that night. He was the agent on the road in Germany, and it was very dark. It was a sportshalle in Germany, and it was very dark back there. So he couldn't see my hand, and he just wanted to know what I was doing back there. I should have been at ringside. And I said, Rick, I've got Mick's ear in my hand. And he said, what? I said, I've got Mick's ear in my hand. Like, we need to find ice. I need to, put it on ice. He said, are you feeling all right? And I took him by the arm, and I pulled him over to a more, like a lighted area, and I showed him. And he just looked at me. He said, holy shit.
Right.
He said, that's a human ear. I said, yeah, that's what I'm trying to tell you. So I had to go find the doctor and get the ear put on ice, but they were never able to reattach it.
Oh, my goodness. I just imagine there's just nothing but kind of adrenaline taking over at that point. You're like, okay, I have this ear. I have to go take care of this. But
yeah, you're right. Because, like, if someone were to walk in here now and say, here, I have someone's nose, would you hold it?
Right.
I tell them, what are you, out of your mind?
Right.
But, yeah, you're right. I mean, you do what you have to do under certain circumstances, things you'd never, ever think of doing.
Yeah, there's no training for that.
No.
Now, I got to ask you this, too. Joe had mentioned this. Like I said, he's been reading your book. He loves it so far. He's in the middle of it. He told me, and I got to think, okay, so to put this in perspective, if you're a guy like John Cena or Hulk Hogan, you probably expect to have a stalker. That could happen. I'm guessing you didn't, but you have a stalker apparently at one point here.
You know what I'm thinking when you're saying that your friend is in the middle of the book?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to ruin the end of the book for him because I didn't die at the end. Yeah, I did. Back in the early days, way before internet, they had fan clubs for wrestlers. And there was every year, I think it was in St. Louis, but I'm not sure. I never went to it. But they would have a convention. And all the presidents from the fan clubs would meet. And I have no idea what they did out there. But they would vote for, like, the best newsletter, the best whatever. So this woman came up to me at one point, and she asked if she could start a fan club for me. And I said, no. I felt really uncomfortable with that because it was kind of presumptuous. She said, well, why not? I said, because no one would join. So, but she would come up to me, over months. And finally I gave in, and I said, okay. And as it turned out, she put out the best newsletter, we would win Newsletter of the Year several years in a row, and she kept on enlisting fans. It kept on growing and growing and growing. And then a couple things happened which were warning signs. One was people started coming up to me and congratulating me for my recent engagement. And I said, I'm not engaged to anybody. And she was telling everyone that we were engaged to be married. And then some of the women would come up to me, and I started hearing they would have the same story, similar stories, where they were starting to get harassing phone calls from this unknown person. And as it turns out, it was her. And so when I put it together, I just said to her, I want nothing more to do with you, so someone else took over the club. So then every time that I would announce after that, she would show up, she would get a front row seat, she was dressed in black, she had a black hat and black netting, like she was in mourning. And she wouldn't watch the matches. She would stare at me the entire time. And it was freaky. It was dangerous. It was freaky.
Yeah.
One night, I had a show in an Asbury Park Convention Hall in New Jersey. And that wasn't too far from where I was living. And when I pulled onto the street where I lived, I saw some commotion up ahead. And when I got closer to my house, there was a bonfire that had been lit. A fire had been lit on the front lawn of my house. And I pulled over to the side and I started stomping it out. And they were all Gary Michael Cappetta pictures. and Gary Michael Cappetta memorabilia. And I wasn't there when it happened, when it started, but I believe that she did that. And then she died young, and I come to find out that when she passed away and they went into her living quarters, she had like my pictures all over the walls.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like a shrine.
Yeah.
It was dangerous. It was freaky.
Wow. Yeah, that's you definitely worked under some. Those were not safe work conditions, Gary. I don't think that was having somebody in mourning too, like dressed in front of you, just staring at you probably at the whole time of the show. I can't imagine like trying to.
Yeah, everybody was cheering, at the action and what was going on in the ring.
Yeah.
And she was almost like motionless, except for her head. Her head would move.
Cool.
When I would get in the ring, her gaze, her eyes just kept following me.
Oh. Well, on a lighter note about your book, one other thing Joe wanted to ask me about was he really liked the way it was formatted. He liked the fact that under like each chapter you had like a list of the topics and like some quotes about it. Was there a particular strategy to that, or how did that come about?
No, not necessarily strategy. It was just like a stylistic choice of quotes from people outside of wrestling that applied to the chapter that you're about to read. Yeah, when I left WCW, I never intended to write a book. But it was very difficult after being on the road and then just stopping cold turkey. It was really difficult. So I just started to write some memories down, and then I just kept on writing and writing. It was like a therapeutic exercise, and I wrote for 2 years. And I would write and edit, and I loved it. I loved the life of writing. Didn't go back to teaching. I didn't do any announcing. I just wrote, and had a good time with it.
That's awesome. Now, how did you leave WCW? Was it just mutual? What happened there? I don't remember hearing about it.
How did I missed the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. What happened was your exit with WCW? How did that come about?
Oh, I think it was pretty much that Eric Bischoff didn't see the value of my work and thought that I was overpaid on top of it. I was offered an opportunity to stay and to work part-time in the office and then continue with my announcing duties, for which I would have had to move to Atlanta. And I had no interest in working in the office. I had no interest in moving to Atlanta.
Yeah, I can understand that.
I mean, that's what I would conclude, because why else would you not renew someone's contract if you didn't see their value, or, I have no idea why. I knew that the money was part of it, because when they offered working part-time in the office, I was trying to justify the amount of my contract.
So, yeah, you had no intention, you were saying, of being a ring announcer. So one of the questions I was going to ask you, did you ever have any interaction with Howard Finkel, who just passed away?
Somewhat. It's unusual for there to be two main announcers at the same event at the same time. I mean, there's just no need for two of us to be there. But since he also worked in the office, in the WWF office, from time to time he would come to events where I was ring announcing, and he was a very nice man, very, very nice man.
Obviously, you had your own style. You got into this. Did you ever look at other ring announcers, whether it be like Howard, whether it be like boxing or MMA announcers like the Buffers? Did you ever borrow anything? Did you ever look at something and go, oh, I like the way they do that, and maybe try to incorporate something we wouldn't notice as fans, but maybe something you picked up on?
Yes, but probably not announcers that you would be familiar with, because that happened when, I started announcing in 1974. So I would look at Jimmy Lennon Sr.
Oh, okay.
Because I thought he was classy. There was Smiling Sam Mason. He was the other one. Friendly Bob Freed, who was kind of goofy and mispronounced a lot of words, and I liked him because he was real. So, like a combination of a couple. Because when you have no training, and you get into the ring, you're going to parrot what you liked when you were watching from the fifth row, which is why it can be terrific or dangerous as to what WWE does, because everybody copies what they do. So when they do something that I'm not a fan of, I'm saying, oh no, because it's going to take decades to reverse the impact of of what they're doing.
And we're in a generation too where a lot of that happens. Like if people see something crazy on a YouTube video, people want to copy it, people want to imitate, they want to do it.
And I would say to young announcers out there, you can incorporate a sense that you like. For instance, I said I liked the one guy because he was a little goofy, and the other guy because he was just the opposite. He was like very proper. But to say the same words in the same way as another announcer is no way to distinguish yourself. I don't even know what the whole phrase is, but the phrase that Paul Heyman uses for Lesnar, he's the undisputed, the whatever.
Yep.
I mean, every independent wrestling show that I go to, I hear that phrase. And it's like, well, I hear that, and I don't think of you, Mr. Up-and-Coming Announcer, or Miss Up-and-Coming Announcer. I think of the guy that originated it.
Right.
So if you want to create your own person, you need to be your own person.
Yeah, I think Ric Flair had a story about how he used to idolize Dusty Rhodes, and he wanted to be like, I think it was Rambling Randy Rhodes or something, and Dusty told him, no, you figure out who you are. You be Ric Flair.
Right. I mean, every performer, it doesn't matter whether you're a wrestler or you're a comedian or a singer, you grew up idolizing certain people, and you pattern somewhat of your style from them, but you don't become them.
Right. Have you watched any of these Dark Side of the Ring documentaries?
I have, yep.
Just curious to get your thoughts on some of these. Did you watch the one with David Schultz the other night?
I did. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was very interesting to me, because that definitely puts an interesting light on Vince, too.
Yeah, what I found most interesting about it was that David Schultz came across as being like common sense kind of guy, and John Stossel was a jerk.
Yes.
Like my ear stopped ringing a little bit more when I got my payoff.
I'm so with you on this, Gary, because, right, if you just tell somebody this guy slapped this guy in the face, you don't expect to watch that show and go, I'm sympathetic towards the guy who hit the other guy.
Yeah, I mean, through the whole thing, I thought David Schultz came across as being very reasonable.
Yeah, and I honestly, me and a couple friends that watch wrestling were talking about this. I kind of believe him. Like, I mean, I just believe that Vince probably told him to act a certain way and handle it, and David's never changed the story on anything I've ever seen, and it just makes sense. And if you listen to Cornette and all those guys, like, they just knew it was a bad idea to have Stossel even there. So it kind of makes me wonder, how did this even happen to begin with?
Well, probably because Vinny wanted, he wanted to mainstream wrestling.
Right.
So the more exposure wrestling got on mainstream programming, the better it would be. I mean, Vinny himself went on Larry King Live back in the day. He went on Donahue, during his steroid trial. So he wasn't hiding from other media. He was trying to spread the word of the WWF in non-wrestling kind of forums.
One other thing about Vince. Did you have an opinion, or you thought about when he was on the advisory board for Donald Trump there? He's supposed to help get the economy back?
An opinion about it? Well, I mean, they go way back. I mean, their politics, their lifestyles, are aligned, with each other. So, I mean, his wife was a cabinet member.
Right.
She ran for Senate a couple times on the Republican ticket. So, no, I mean, it was no big surprise.
You've been in the business for a while. What would be some of the best advice you ever got in the business for your career?
I didn't get a whole lot of advice, to tell you the truth. I just made my own path, used common sense, did what I thought was right, even though it cost me money a few times. Yeah, I mean, there was no... Actually, Gorilla Monsoon was the first to treat me as, like I said before, as a human being. The Grand Wizard, back then, Ernie Roth, he was a manager in the WWF. He also talked to me like an individual. At the end of my WCW years, Gordon Soley was, there would be times when I'd have I'd get frustrated with management, and Gordon Soley would talk me down, But as far as like a kernel of like truth, there wasn't anything in particular that anyone ever gave me any words to live by.
Now, you said before, a stage show you were doing. What was that experience like, and do you have any plans to do any more?
This was something that I had developed all the way back in 2002, before there were anyone was going around doing Q&As or those kind of standalone wrestling personality shows. It was pretty much telling stories from the book and beyond, which is why I called it Body Slams and Beyond. Not everyone's going to pick up the book and read it. Not everybody learns the same way. Some people just like to have stories told to them. So it was a way for me to communicate some of the stories and some of the information that's in the book. As I'm telling the stories overhead on giant screen video, you're seeing some of the incidents. For instance, you mentioned the night Mick Foley lost his ear. As I'm telling you about that incident, you're seeing the match in which he lost his ear in Germany, which was, it was not like formally televised, but it was picked up by a wrestling fan at ringside on his camcorder. So, there are different things. Like I tell a story about being on the road with The Undertaker. So it was a week-long tour in the Midwest. And as I'm telling you the story, you're seeing our route, from city to city, state to state, with some, pictures of him at the time. Same thing with Steve Austin, where we traveled through the night. And the end was we were to wind up in Houston, and he was going to team up with his brother, and we were supposed to meet his brother at a strip club in Houston, and we couldn't find the club. So as I'm telling the story, you're seeing pictures of what I'm talking about, of the area and things like that. So it's and then it's a 2-hour show with a 15-minute intermission, and then at the end of the show, I'll take questions from the audience.
Gary, is there anything you want to promote? Your book? You want to talk about your book a little bit? The floor is yours.
I think right now I'm Gary Cappetta on Twitter, at Gary Cappetta, and on Facebook, it's my initials, GMC, the number 4, real, GMC for real. And on my Facebook, GMC for real, on the left-hand column, if you click fan subscriptions, you can be a GMC patron, and I make posts that are not visible to the general public, only to the people that subscribe. So if you want to be a Gary Michael Cappetta subscriber or patron, then you go to Facebook, GMC for real. And with the quarantine, there's nothing live coming up that's scheduled, so I have nothing like that to promote.
Well, Gary, this was a pleasure. You're a great storyteller, and I thoroughly enjoyed this, my man.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, and I thank your buddy for reading the book. Yeah. And hopefully when he's done, he's not going to lend it to you. He's going to make you go out and buy it.
Don't worry. Thank you very much, Gary. I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. Because of the quarantine, this will probably go out in 2 weeks, but I'll let you know. We'll tweet it out, and I'll message you. And this was an absolute pleasure, my man. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah, let me know, and I'll send me the link to it, and I'll post it on my outlets.
Awesome. I appreciate it very much, Gary. Again, thank you so much. Great storyteller. This was fun.
You're welcome, Dave. Nice meeting you. Take care.
All right, so that wraps us up for this week. Thank you again for listening to the Working Fans Podcast. So as always, you can find us on Twitter at FansWorking. Our Facebook page is Working Fans Wrestling Pod. We have email where you can reach out to us and let us know what you think also. That's workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram, workingfanswrestling_pod. And then as always, please continue to listen to us on Anchor.fm, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, all your major platforms. If you're following us on Apple Podcasts, which we are also on now, and YouTube, please make sure you subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. It helps us bring you these podcasts where we get to talk to you and talk with you every week.